The black SUV cut through
Hey,
the
what's wrong?
empty
Talk to me.
Montana highway like a predator, tracking wounded prey. Inside, 6-year-old Wren Callahan pressed her small body against the passenger door, her bare feet tucked beneath her torn pink dress. Dried blood crusted the soles of her feet from running across gravel 2 stops ago, when she had almost made it to a gas station bathroom before the bad man caught her arm and squeezed until she stopped screaming. That was 47 hours ago, or maybe longer. Wren had lost count of the sunrises. She kept her eyes on the window, watching the Montana landscape blur past in streaks of brown and green. Mountains rose in the distance like sleeping giants, their peaks still dusted with the late spring snow. Her grandmother used to tell her stories about those mountains, about the people who lived in their shadows. Tough people, scary-looking people. Grandma May always said the scariest-looking folks sometimes had the kindest hearts. She would sit on the porch swing with Wren curled against her side, pointing at the bikers who sometimes rode past their neighborhood in thundering formation. Don't judge a book by its cover, little bird. Sometimes the monsters you're running from wear suits and smiles, and sometimes the angels have tattoos and ride motorcycles. Wren did not understand what that meant back then. She was starting to understand now. The man driving the SUV called himself Aldrich. He told her that on the first day when he offered her candy at Riverside Park. He seemed so nice at first, clean-shaven face, expensive watch catching the afternoon sun, the kind of smile that made grown-ups trust him immediately. "I'm a friend of your daddy's," he had said, crouching down to her level with that warm, practiced expression. "He asked me to pick you up. There's been an emergency." Wren had known it was a lie. Her daddy always picked her up himself, even when he was tired from working double shifts at the construction site, even when his back hurt and his hands were cracked from the cold. Declan Callahan never missed picking up his daughter. Her daddy smelled like sawdust and coffee and the peppermint gum he chewed because he was trying to quit smoking. This man smelled like medicine and something sweet that made her stomach turn, like flowers that had been dead too long. But before she could run, before she could scream, Aldrich pressed something over her nose and mouth, a cloth that smelled sharp and chemical. The world went fuzzy and gray, sounds stretching like taffy colors bleeding into each other. When Wren woke up, she was in this SUV. The back seats had been removed. In their place was a thin mattress stained with things she did not want to identify. Metal rings had been bolted to the floor. Cold rings that made her think of chains and darkness and all the bad things that happened in the shadows of the world. She had seen the zip ties, the duct tape, the cooler filled with juice boxes and animal crackers and little white pills that Aldrich called sleepy candy. He made her take one of those pills on the first day. After that, Wren learned to pretend. She learned to put the pill on her tongue and take a sip of juice and tilt her head back like she was swallowing. She learned to keep the pill tucked beneath her tongue, hidden in the pocket of her cheek until Aldrich looked away. Then she would spit it into her palm and hide it in the torn seam of the mattress. She needed to stay awake. She needed to remember everything, because Wren Callahan was not going to disappear. The SUV slowed as they approached a small town. Wren could see a gas station up ahead, its red and white sign flickering in the afternoon sun. Her heart began to pound against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I need to use the bathroom." She kept her voice quiet, subdued, the voice of a child who had given up fighting. Aldrich liked that voice. It made him relax. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. His eyes were cold now, calculating. Nothing like the warm smile he had worn at the park. These were the real eyes, the monster eyes hiding behind the mask. "You went an hour ago." "I have to go again. My tummy hurts." It was not entirely a lie. Her stomach had been cramping for days from fear and the stale crackers that were all he let her eat. But mostly Wren needed him to stop the car. She needed a chance. Just one chance. Aldrich sighed through his nose, a sound of irritation that made Wren's skin prickle with fear. He pulled into the gas station gravel, crunching beneath the tires as they rolled to a stop beside a pump. 2 minutes. He unlocked the doors with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet of the SUV. And Wren, she froze with her hand on the door handle. "If you try to run again, I'll have to give you more sleepy candy. Enough to keep you quiet for a very long time." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Do you understand?" Wren nodded, her chin trembling. But inside, something hard and fierce was building in her chest. Something that felt like the opposite of fear. She climbed out of the SUV on shaking legs. The afternoon air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. Wren breathed it in deeply, filling her lungs with freedom while she still could. The mountains rose around them like silent witnesses, the sleeping giants from Grandma May's stories. Aldrich walked her to the bathroom, his hand clamped around her wrist like a vice, cold fingers pressing against her pulse. He checked inside the small room to make sure there were no windows and no other exits. Then he pushed her through the door. 2 minutes. The lock clicked behind her. Wren stood in the cramped bathroom, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made her skin look gray. There was a small window near the ceiling, painted shut and covered with grime, too high for her to reach even if she could force it open. But there was a vent, a metal grate near the floor, partially rusted, just big enough for a small body to squeeze through. The screws were old, corroded, the kind of screws that had not been tightened in years. Wren dropped to her knees. Her fingers were weak from days of little food and less sleep, but fear gave her strength she did not know she had. She dug her fingernails into the edges of the grate, pulling and twisting, ignoring the pain as the metal bit into her skin. The first screw gave way with a grinding sound. Then the second. The grate came free with a metallic screech that made Wren freeze, certain Aldrich would hear. She held her breath, counting the seconds, waiting for the door to burst open, waiting for his cold hands to grab her again. Nothing happened. She peered into the vent. It was dark and narrow, barely wider than her shoulders. She had no idea where it led. Maybe outside, maybe to another room, maybe to a dead end where she would be trapped until Aldrich found her. But staying here was certain death. Wren had heard enough of his phone calls to understand that much. She had pretended to sleep while he talked, keeping her breathing slow and even her eyes closed to slits so she could watch his face without him knowing. "Package acquired," he had said to someone on the first night. ET, a 6 hours, buyer confirmed. Full payment on delivery. And later, when he thought she was completely unconscious, his voice had changed, become something eager and ugly. "This one's perfect. Young, healthy, no medical issues, premium price." Wren did not know what premium price meant, but she knew it was bad. She knew that wherever Aldrich was taking her, she would not be coming back. She squeezed into the vent. The metal was cold against her skin, rough with rust that scraped her arms and legs as she crawled. The darkness was absolute, pressing against her eyes like a physical weight. Wren had always been afraid of the dark. She used to sleep with a nightlight shaped like a unicorn, its soft pink glow keeping the monsters at bay. But the real monsters did not live in the dark. The real monsters wore expensive polo shirts and drove black SUVs and smiled at little girls in parks. Wren kept crawling. The vent twisted and turned, narrowing in places until she had to exhale completely to squeeze through. Her dress caught on a jagged edge and tore further, the sound of ripping fabric impossibly loud in the confined space. She did not stop. She could hear sounds now. Muffled voices, the clink of dishes, the sizzle of a grill, a kitchen, a restaurant attached to the gas station. The vent ended at another grate. This one opened into a storage room filled with boxes and cleaning supplies. Wren pushed against it, her small arms trembling with effort. The grate fell outward with a clatter that seemed impossibly loud. She tumbled out onto the concrete floor, gasping, trembling, covered in rust and dust and blood from a dozen small cuts. But she was out. She was free. For now. Wren scrambled to her feet and looked around wildly. The storage room had one door slightly ajar, leading into what looked like a kitchen. She could hear the sizzle of a grill, the clatter of pots and pans, voices calling out orders in rapid succession. She ran. The kitchen workers barely had time to register the small, dirty girl sprinting through their workspace before she was gone, bursting through a side door into the blinding afternoon sunlight, her feet slapping against hot concrete, her torn dress streaming behind her like a flag of surrender she refused to wave. Behind her, she heard someone shout. Ahead of her, she saw the gas station parking lot, Aldrich's black SUV gleaming like a nightmare made metal, and beyond it the open road stretching toward the mountains. Aldrich was standing by the bathroom door, his face twisted with confusion that was rapidly turning to rage. He saw her. Their eyes met across the parking lot. For one frozen moment, neither of them moved. Then Wren ran faster than she had ever run in her life. Her feet slapped against the gravel, sending jolts of pain through her already injured soles. Blood smeared with each step, leaving a trail that Aldrich could follow. But Wren did not care about the pain. She did not care about anything except putting distance between herself and the man who wanted to sell her. Wren? His voice was smooth, controlled, pitched to sound concerned rather than angry. Wren, sweetie, come back. You're confused. I'm trying to help you. She did not look back. Grandma May always said that looking back was how you got caught. You had to keep your eyes forward, fixed on where you were going, not where you had been. The road stretched out before her, empty and endless. No cars, no people, nothing but asphalt and sky and the distant mountains watching over her like silent guardians. Wren's lungs burned. Her legs screamed for rest. She was 6 years old and had barely eaten in 2 days, and her body was failing her even as her spirit refused to quit. Behind her, she heard the SUV's engine roar to life. No, 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 no. She veered off the road, plunging into the scrubby brush that lined the highway. The vegetation was sparse, but better than nothing, offering some cover as she stumbled through rocks and weeds and scattered debris. The SUV could not follow her here, but Aldrich could. She heard a car door slam, footsteps crunching on gravel, the brush rustling as someone pushed through it behind her. Wren. His voice was closer now. All pretense of warmth gone. You're making this very difficult. The buyers don't like damaged goods, but they'll take what they can get. He paused, and she could hear his breathing getting closer. You don't want to be damaged goods, do you? Wren kept running. Branches whipped at her face, leaving thin lines of fire across her cheeks. Her pink dress caught on a thorny bush and ripped almost in half. She did not stop. And then she saw it. A building half hidden behind a cluster of trees, low and weathered with a gravel parking lot and a sign she could not quite read from this distance. But what she could see, what made her heart leap with desperate hope, was the row of motorcycles parked outside. At least a dozen of them, chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun, lined up like sleeping dragons waiting for their riders. Bikers. Grandma May's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes the angels have tattoos and ride motorcycles. Wren did not know if that was true. She did not know if the people inside that building would help her or hand her back to Aldrich with an apologetic shrug. She did not know anything except that Aldrich was getting closer and her legs were giving out, and she had no other choice. She ran toward the door. It was marked with a skull and crossbones. The paint faded but still visible. A warning. A threat. Keep out. Danger ahead. Wren did not hesitate. She had already met the real monsters. Whatever was behind this door could not be worse. She burst through the entrance with enough force to crack the wooden frame. The Iron Horse Tavern fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. 12 men sat scattered around the dim interior, their leather vests adorned with patches and symbols Wren did not understand. They were big men, most of them, bearded and tattooed, hard yays and scarred hands, and the kind of faces that made mothers pull their children closer on sidewalks. Wren stood in the doorway, barefoot and trembling, her torn pink dress hanging off one shoulder, her face streaked with dirt and tears and blood. She could not have been more than 40 pounds, soaking wet, a tiny figure against the backdrop of chrome and leather and danger. Behind her, through the still swinging door, the afternoon sunlight silhouetted a black SUV pulling into the parking lot. Wren did not cower. She did not collapse into hysterics. She had spent 47 hours being scared, and somewhere along the way, the fear had burned itself out, leaving only something harder, something fiercer, something that felt like steel being forged in fire. She straightened her spine. She looked directly at the biggest, scariest man in the room, and she spoke in a voice that did not waver. "Help me! The bad man is outside. He took me from Riverside Park 2 days ago. I got away when he stopped for gas. I need help." She paused, her chin lifting with defiance. "Please." Nobody moved. The big man she had addressed was a weathered giant with silver-streaked hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He set down his beer glass slowly, deliberately, like a man trying to process something his brain was not quite ready to accept. His leather vest identified him as the chapter president. A patch on his chest read, "Flint Donovan." He was 58 years old, though he looked older. The kind of old that comes not from years, but from hard living and harder losses. 20 years ago, his 14-year-old daughter, Rosalie, had walked to a friend's house 3 blocks away and never come home. They found her body a week later, discarded like garbage in an abandoned warehouse, her dark hair matted with blood, her eyes open and staring at nothing. Flint had spent 2 decades living with that grief, channeling it into the club, into the brotherhood, into a life that felt like penance rather than purpose. He had seen a lot of things walk through the Iron Horse doors: drunks, cops, rival clubs looking for trouble, but never this. Never a 6-year-old girl with knowing eyes and blood on her feet, standing straight as a soldier and asking for help like she expected to receive it. The door opened again. A man walked in, mid-40s, wearing an expensive polo shirt and pressed khakis. His smile was warm, apologetic, perfectly practiced. Everything about him screamed respectability: clean-shaven, manicured nails, a Rolex glinting on his wrist. There she is. He shook his head, the theatrical exasperation. I'm so sorry about this, gentleman. My daughter has quite the imagination. We were playing a game and she took it a little too seriously. He stepped toward Wren. She screamed. It was not a child's tantrum scream. It was the sound of pure primal terror. The sound of prey recognizing its predator. The sound that had echoed through the nightmares of every parent in that room. The sound they had hoped they would never hear from their own children. Wren scrambled backward, her feet slipping on the wooden floor. She crashed into Flint's legs, and without thinking, she grabbed fistfuls of his jeans and hid behind him, making herself as small as possible. No, 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 no. Her voice was a desperate whisper against the worn denim. He's not my daddy. He's not my daddy. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. My daddy's name is Declan Callahan. He builds houses. He works at the construction site on Pine Street. He has a scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike when he was little. The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam. He smells like sawdust and coffee and peppermint gum. His hands are rough from working with wood. His left pinky finger is crooked because he broke it playing baseball in high school. She pointed at Aldrich's manicured hands. That man has soft hands. He didn't know my name on the first day. He called me sweetie and honey and darling until he found my school folder in my backpack and saw my name written on it. Her grip on Flint's jeans tightened. He calls me sweetie, and it makes my skin crawl. Please, please, don't let him take me. The room changed. 12 men in leather vests. Most of them veterans of foreign wars. Most of them fathers or grandfathers. They felt something shift in the air. That protective instinct that lives in the chest of anyone who has ever loved a child. It sparked and caught fire, spreading through the room like wildfire through dry brush. Flint's massive hand came down on Wren's shoulder. Gentle but firm, a promise without words. Stay behind me, sweetheart. The man in the polo shirt, Aldrich, his smile did not waver, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation. Assessment. The quick mental arithmetic of a predator weighing his options. Sir, I understand this looks concerning, but I assure you this is simply a misunderstanding. My daughter has behavioral issues. Her therapist says she creates these elaborate fantasies when she's upset. He spread his hands in a gesture of helpless parental frustration. I just need to get her home and we can sort all this out. What's your daughter's name? The question came from Hawk Mercer, the club's sergeant-at-arms, 6'4", 270 pounds, arms covered in tattoos that told stories of violence and survival. He had moved to block the front door without anyone noticing. Aldrich's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. Wren, her name is Wren. Behind Flint, the little girl flinched at the sound of her own name in his mouth, but she did not stay silent. She could not afford to. He's lying. Her voice was small but certain, carrying through the quiet room like a bell through fog. He didn't know my name at first. He called me sweetie and honey and darling for the whole first day. He only found out my name when he went through my backpack and found my school folder with my name written on it. She paused, gathering her courage. My daddy calls me Little Bird. That's his special name for me. No one else calls me that. If this man was really my daddy, he would know. Ranger Caldwell stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. former Navy SEAL, 3 tours in Afghanistan. He had seen terror in many forms, in the eyes of civilians caught in crossfire, in the faces of soldiers watching friends die. But he had never seen terror like what lived in this child's eyes. And he had never seen courage like what kept her standing, kept her talking, kept her fighting, even when everything in her body must have been screaming to collapse. Sweetheart. He spoke carefully, crouching down to her level while still keeping his body between her and the stranger. What else can you tell us about your real daddy? Things this man wouldn't know. Wren's fingers dug into the worn denim of Flint's jeans, but her voice remained steady. My daddy's hands are rough from working with wood. This man's hands are soft like he never worked a day in his life. She held up her own small hand, demonstrating. My daddy has calluses here and here and here, from holding a hammer, from cutting boards, from building things. She pointed at Aldrich's manicured hands. That man has soft hands, pretty hands, the kind of hands that never built anything. The room went absolutely still. My daddy sings "You Are My Sunshine" when he tucks me in at night, but he always gets the words wrong on purpose to make me laugh. He sings "You Make Me Happy" when skies are purple instead of gray. Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice did not break. My daddy smells like sawdust and coffee and peppermint gum because he's trying to quit smoking. This man smells like medicine and dead flowers. She looked directly at Aldrich, and in that moment she was not a 6-year-old girl. She was a witness, a survivor, a force that would not be silenced. My daddy would never put me in a car with no seats and a mattress on the floor. My daddy would never give me pills and call them sleepy candy. My daddy would never talk about me on the phone and say a premium price like I was something for sale. The silence that followed was deafening. Aldrich's mask slipped for just a fraction of a second. Annoyance, frustration, something darker beneath something predatory and cold. Then the pleasant smile returned, though it did not quite reach his eyes. She's very creative. As I mentioned, she has issues. He stepped forward again. Now, if you'll excuse me. He reached for Wren. Flint's hand shot out and caught his wrist in a grip that made the man gasp. She doesn't want to go with you. You don't understand. Aldrich's voice hardened. I have legal custody. I have documentation in my car. This is a family matter and you're interfering with it. Then you won't mind waiting for the police to verify that. Aldrich tried to pull his hand back. Flint did not let go. This is ridiculous. For the first time, real anger crept into his voice. You're a bunch of criminals. Everyone knows what kind of club this is. You can't hold me here. This is kidnapping. Funny you should use that word. Sable Kincaid stepped out from the back room, her phone already pressed to her ear. She was the only female member of the chapter. Former Army intelligence. Road name Raven for the dark hair Dee had before it turned silver, and for her habit of collecting information like a bird collecting shiny objects. 911, yes, I need to report a possible child abduction. We have the child safe at the Iron Horse Tavern on Route 12. The suspect is a white male, mid-40s, driving a black SUV. She squinted through the window at the parking lot. Montana plate 7, David Frank, 492. Yes, we'll hold him here. Thank you. Aldrich's face went pale. For the first time, the confident facade cracked completely, revealing the desperate man beneath. This is a misunderstanding. His voice had changed. The smoothness was gone, replaced by something tight and panicked. You're making a huge mistake. Do you have any idea who I am? I have lawyers. I have connections. He was backing toward the door now. I'll have this place shut down. I'll have all of you arrested for assault, for false imprisonment. He bolted. Aldrich yanked his wrist free with sudden violence and lunged for the back door, moving faster than anyone expected for a man in pressed khakis. He made it 3 steps. Ranger hit him low. A perfect watt tackle that drove him into the pool table with a crack of breaking wood. Hawk came in from the side. A third biker named Duke Farrell grabbed his arms. Within seconds, Aldrich was face down on the floor with 3 large men holding him in place. Get off me! Get off! He was screaming now. I'll sue every one of you! All of you! His wallet fell out of his pocket during the struggle, contents scattering across the floor like secrets spilling into light. Hawk picked it up and started going through it, his face growing darker with each discovery. Aldrich Voss. He held up a driver's license. That's funny. This ID says Raymond Schiller. He kept digging. And this one says David Peterson, and this one says Michael Watts. He looked down at the struggling man with disgust that bordered on physical revulsion. How many names you got, friend? But it was what else fell out of the wallet that made everyone go quiet. Zip ties, heavy duty, the kind you would use for industrial applications or for binding someone who might struggle. A small roll of duct tape and a prescription bottle with no label, filled with small white pills. Wren started crying again, burying her face in Flint's leg. But even through her tears, she spoke. He made me take one of those at the park. He said it was candy. It made me sleepy. And then I was in his car, and I didn't know where I was. Flint felt something cold and ancient wake up in his chest, something he had felt 20 years ago, standing in a hospital morgue in Billings, looking down at what remained of his daughter, something he had spent 2 decades trying to bury. Ranger. His voice was quiet, controlled, deadly. Check his vehicle. Ranger was already moving. The SUV was not locked. What he found inside made him step back and take several deep breaths before he could report. Flint. His voice was strange, hollow. You need to see this. Flint looked down at Wren. Sable, stay with Mario. Sable gathered the child into her arms, murmuring soft reassurances as Flint walked out to the parking lot. The afternoon sun seemed too bright, too cheerful for what he was about to witness. The SUV's back seats had been removed. In their place was a thin mattress stained with things Flint did not want to identify. Restraints had been bolted to the floor. Metal rings designed to hold someone in place during transport. A cooler sat in the corner, filled with juice boxes and animal crackers and more of those unmarked pills. But it was the phone mounted on the dashboard that made Flint's blood run cold. It was open to a messaging app, the screen still illuminated with recent conversations. Flint read them, feeling his hands begin to shake with rage he had not felt in 20 years. Package acquired. 6 hours. Buyer confirmed. Full payment on delivery. And below that, this one's perfect. Young, healthy, no medical issues, premium price. And below that, tell the boss the Montana package is difficult. Might need sedation for transport. Wren Callahan was not being kidnapped. She was being sold. Flint stared at the screen, his vision narrowing to a red tunnel of fury. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard Rosalie's voice. Daddy, help me. The voice he had heard in nightmares for 2 decades. The voice he had never been able to answer. But Wren was still alive. Wren was still here. And Wren had been brave enough to run into a bar full of outlaws and ask for help. He walked back into the tavern, each step deliberate, controlled. Aldrich Voss, or whatever his real name was still pinned to the floor, still threatening lawsuits and connections and retribution. His voice had taken on a desperate wheedling quality. Flint crouched down next to him. Let me tell you what's going to happen. His voice was barely above a whisper, but everyone in the room heard it clearly. The police are coming. When they get here, they're going to find everything in your vehicle. They're going to find your fake IDs and your messages and your buyer contacts. He leaned closer. And you're going to spend the rest of your miserable life in a cell, if you're lucky. Aldrich's bravado cracked like thin ice over deep water. You don't understand. These people, you don't know who you're dealing with. His voice dropped to a desperate whisper. If you let me go, I can disappear. No one has to know. I can give you money. Money, Flint's laugh was cold enough to frost glass. You think we want money? Everyone wants something. Name your price. 50,000, 100, I can get it. Flint stood up slowly, looking down at the man with something that went beyond contempt. Hawk, Duke, get him into the back room. Make sure he doesn't hurt himself before the cops arrive. He paused. We want him healthy enough to answer questions. They dragged Aldrich away, his pleading echoing off the walls until the storage room door closed behind him. Flint turned to find Wren watching him. She had stopped crying. Her tear-streaked face peeked out from Sable's protective embrace, those steady, knowing eyes fixed on his with an intensity that had made his chest ache. In them, Flint saw something he recognized, the look of a survivor, the look of someone who had stared into the abyss, and refused to blink. Is the bad man going away? Flint knelt down to her level, his knees protesting the movement. Up close, he could see every cut and bruise, every mark of her 47-hour ordeal. And beneath all of that, the fierce intelligence that had kept her alive. He's never going to hurt you again. I promise. Ren studied his face for a long moment. She had been lied to before. Adults made promises all the time that they did not keep. But something in this man's eyes was different. Something old and worn and absolutely certain. Promise, promise. The words hit Flint like a physical blow. Rosalie used to say that when she was small, when she wanted him to be absolutely certain. She would make him say it twice. Promise, promise, Daddy. Like the words had extra power when you doubled them. He had promised to keep her safe. He had promised to always be there. He had not kept those promises. Promise, promise. His voice was rough. Ren reached out and touched the leather of his vest, tracing the Steel Brotherhood patch with one small finger. Her hand was tiny against the worn leather, fragile and strong at the same time. My grandma says bikers are scary. She's not wrong. But you helped me. Flint felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for 20 years, slowly beginning to thaw. Sometimes scary people help, like monsters that fight other monsters. Despite everything, despite the blood on her feet and the terror of the last 2 days. Ren almost smiled. I like that. Monsters that fight monsters. She looked up at him with a gaze far too old for her young face. Are you a monster, Mr. Flint? I've been called worse, but you're a good monster. Right. Flint thought about the question, about the things he had done in his life, the violence, the rage, the darkness that lived in his chest like a sleeping beast. I try to be. Ren nodded solemnly, like that was the only answer she needed. My grandma also says sometimes the angels have tattoos and ride motorcycles. She looked around the room at the scarred faces and leather vests and the men who had just saved her life. I think she was right. The sirens were audible now, getting closer. Red and blue lights flickered through the windows, painting the dim interior of the Iron Horse in patriotic colors. Sable's phone buzzed, and she checked it and her face went complicated. Flint, I ran those plate numbers and the names from his IDs through my contacts. She paused, looking at Ren, clearly debating how much to say in front of the child. Raven. Flint's voice was quiet. She's earned the right to hear it. Sable nodded slowly. Aldrich Voss, also known as Raymond Schiller, David Peterson, Michael Watts. Wanted in 3 states. Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska. Multiple child abductions over the past 5 years. She took a breath. They've been looking for him for 2 years. Ren's small hand found Flint's and squeezed. I knew he was bad. Her voice was quiet. I could tell. He smiled too much and his eyes never matched his mouth. Flint squeezed back gently. Ren, how long were you in that car? The little girl's face crumpled slightly, the first real crack in her remarkable composure. A long time. He stopped a lot. Different houses. She was trembling again. I saw other kids sometimes, through the windows. They looked scared, like me. The room went absolutely silent. Other kids? Ranger's voice was strained. Ren nodded. He said if I was good, I could play with them. But I never saw the same kids twice. She looked up at Flint with eyes that held too much knowledge for a child her age. Where did they go? The other kids? Flint did not answer. He could not, because the answer was a darkness too deep for any child to understand, and too heavy for any adult to carry. Sable was already moving, grabbing the phone from the SUV, scrolling through messages and contacts with urgent precision. Flint, her voice was strange, tight. This isn't just one man. What do you mean? I mean this phone has contacts with 12 different numbers, coded conversations, coordinates for 6 different locations across 4 states. She looked up, her face pale beneath its weathered tan. This is a network. The first police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. More sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Flint looked at the back room where Aldrich was being held, looked at Ren still trembling slightly but standing tall, looked at his brothers. These men who society wrote off as criminals and thugs, who had just helped save a little girl's life. Everyone listen up. His voice cut through the noise. When the cops get here, we tell them exactly what happened. Every detail. We cooperate fully. We give them everything. And then, Ranger asked. Flint's jaw tightened. And then we have a church meeting. Because if there are other kids out there, his voice caught for just a moment before hardening into steel. We're going to find them. Wren tugged on his hand. Promise, promise. Flint looked down at her, at this tiny warrior who had run through hell on bare feet and refused to stop fighting. Promise, promise. The police came through the door with weapons drawn, shouting commands that echoed off the walls. The next hour was controlled chaos, statements and evidence, and questions that seemed to go in circles. Sheriff's deputies first, then state police. Then a woman in a federal windbreaker who introduced herself as FBI agent Marlo Sinclair. Wren was examined by paramedics, gently questioned by a child specialist, wrapped in a shock blanket and given juice. Throughout it all, she refused to let go of Flint's hand. I want to stay with the motorcycle man, she told anyone who tried to separate them. He promised to keep me safe. He promised. Agent Sinclair took Flint in while her colleagues processed the scene. Mr. Donovan, I need you to understand something. Her voice was low, professional, but with an undercurrent of barely contained urgency. The man you apprehended today, the one calling himself Aldrich Voss, he's connected to one of the largest child trafficking operations we've been tracking on the West Coast. We've been trying to locate him for 8 months. Happy to help. I'm serious. She held his gaze. What you found in that vehicle, the messages, the contacts, this could be the break we've been waiting for. You may have saved more children than just Wren. Flint thought about the messages he had seen. This one's perfect. Premium price. The casual horror of human trafficking reduced to business terminology. Good. Wren's parents arrived at sunset. The moment the old pickup truck screeched into the parking lot, Flint knew this was different than what he had feared. A woman tumbled out of the passenger seat before the vehicle fully stopped, screaming her daughter's name. Wren! Wren! The little girl's head snapped up from where she had been dozing against Flint's shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up with her now that she felt safe. Mommy? Eileen Callahan ran across the parking lot like she was being chased by demons, her face a mask of desperate hope and devastating fear. She was still wearing her nurse's scrubs from her shift at the hospital, the shift she had walked out of mid-procedure when the police called. Her husband Declan was right behind her, a big man with calloused hands and sawdust still in his hair, tears streaming down his weathered face. Eileen collapsed to her knees and gathered her daughter into her arms. The sounds she made were not quite words. They were pure, raw emotion. The grief and terror of 47 hours transformed into overwhelming relief. My baby, my baby, my baby, my baby. Mommy, I was so scared. Wren's composure finally cracked, the little soldier becoming a little girl again. But the motorcycle man saved me. He promised, and he didn't let the bad man take me back. Declan Callahan looked at Flint, really looked at him. The leather vest, the tattoos, the scarred face and hard eyes. Everything about this man should have triggered alarm bells. Everything about him screamed danger. But Declan did not see a criminal. He saw the man who had protected his daughter when he could not. You saved her. His voice cracked like ice on a spring river. You saved our little girl. Flint shook his head slowly. She saved herself. She ran. She asked for help. She was brave enough to trust strangers who looked like villains. He paused. Bravest kid I have ever seen. Declan's voice broke completely. We thought the police said, we thought we'd never see her again. He held out his hand. Flint shook it, feeling the rough calluses of a working man, the strong grip of a father who had just gotten his world back. I don't know how to thank you. I don't have words. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to repay this. No repayment necessary. Just take your little girl home. Let her be a kid again. Eileen finally looked up from where she was still clutching Wren like she would never let go again. Her face was destroyed and rebuilt by emotion. Mascara running, hair disheveled, and absolutely beautiful in her relief. Why she asked. Why did you help her? You don't know us. You had no reason to get involved. Flint thought about the question, thought about all the easy answers he could give, because it was the right thing to do, because anyone would have done the same, because that's just who we are. But Wren was watching him, her face pressed against her mother's shoulder, those knowing eyes waiting for the truth. I had a daughter once, he heard himself say. The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere he usually kept locked and guarded. She would be 34 now if she'd lived. She was taken when she was 14, grabbed walking home from a friend's house, 3 blocks away. Broad daylight. The parking lot went quiet. Even the police officers processing the scene seemed to pause. They found her a week later. He did not need to say more. Everyone understood what found her meant in that context. I wasn't there to protect her. I've spent the last 20 years living with that. Every kid I help, every predator I stop. He paused, his voice roughening. It doesn't bring Rosalie back. Nothing can bring her back. But it means she didn't die for nothing. Her memory protects kids like Wren. Her ghost stands between children and the monsters who would hurt them. Eileen Callahan stood up, still holding her daughter, and did something Flint never expected. She hugged him, this stranger, this biker, this scary man with the hard eyes and the scarred hands. She wrapped her free arm around him and held on like he was a life raft in a storm. Thank you for saving our baby. She paused. And I'm so sorry about yours. Flint stood rigid for a moment, unprepared for the contact, for the genuine warmth from someone outside his brotherhood. He had spent 20 years keeping people at arm's length, building walls high enough that no one could see the broken man behind them. Then his arms came up carefully, and he hugged her back. Wren's small hand patted his shoulder. Don't be sad, Mr. Flint. Her voice was soft but certain. Your Rosalie is in heaven, and she's happy you saved me. She paused. She told me so. Flint's vision blurred. She told you. Wren nodded solemnly. When I was running to your door, I was so scared. My legs hurt and I couldn't breathe, and I thought the bad man was going to catch me. She looked up at him with unwavering certainty. And then I heard a voice, a girl's voice. She said, go there. They'll help you. My daddy will keep you safe. She squeezed his hand. So I did. The world stopped making sense for a moment. The parking lot, the flashing lights, the murmur of police radios, all of it faded to static. Flint felt something he had not felt in 20 years, something that might have been hope, or peace, or the first small step toward forgiveness. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. That sounds like something she'd say. The Callahan family stayed for another hour, giving statements, answering questions, holding on to each other like they were afraid to separate for even a moment. Before they finally left, Wren insisted on saying goodbye to each biker individually. She hugged Ranger, who looked uncomfortable but smiled anyway. She high-fived Hawk, her tiny hand disappearing completely in his massive palm. She told a biker named Viper that his tattoos were pretty cool and asked if the snake on his arm was a cobra or a python. She made Sable promise to come visit her, and when she got to Flint, she looked up at him and said something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. You're my angel now. Did you know that? I'm a lot of things, sweetheart, never been called an angel. Well, you are, even if you don't have wings. She paused, considering. Maybe your motorcycle is your wings. Flint laughed. Despite everything, despite the grief and the rage and the 20 years of darkness, this 6-year-old girl had made him laugh. Maybe so. Will you come visit me if your motorcycle wings can fly that far? Flint looked at Eileen, who nodded with tears still fresh on her cheeks. He can come anytime he wants. Our door is always open to you, to all of you. Can the motorcycle man come to my birthday party? Wren tugged on her mother's sleeve. I'm going to be 7 in September. He's invited any of them who want to come. Declan Callahan stepped forward and shook Flint's hand one more time. I meant what I said. If you ever need anything, anything at all, take care of that little girl. That's all the payment I need. They climbed into the old pickup truck. Wren in the middle of the front seat, pressed between her parents like she would never be alone again. As Declan started the engine, Wren suddenly turned back. Mr. Flint, wait. She scrambled to roll down the window. Mommy, the lady. Tell him about the lady. Eileen's face went confused. What lady, sweetheart? The lady who came to our house. Before. The nice lady who asked all the questions. The blood drained from Eileen's way. About a month ago, a woman came to our door. She said she was from some family services organization. Families First Montana. She'd heard we were having financial difficulties. Eileen's voice was rising, memory and horror colliding. Declan's hours got cut at the construction site. We were behind on bills. She wanted to see if we qualified for assistance. Flint's heart rate picked up. What did she look like? Professional, friendly, brown hair, nice smile. She asked a lot of questions about our situation, about Ren, about our support network. Eileen's hand flew to her mouth. I thought she was being thorough. I showed her Ren's room. I told her our whole schedule, that Declan was working doubles, that Ren walked to the park alone sometimes. Did she give you a card, a name? Eileen nodded, her face ashen. Miriam Blake, Family Support Coordinator, Families First Montana. Ren's small voice cut through the growing horror. She asked me questions too when Mommy wasn't listening. She asked if I ever went places by myself, if there were grown-ups around when I played at the park. The little girl looked at Flint with steady determination. She was nice, but her eyes were like his, like the bad man. They didn't match her smile. Ren paused. She chose me, didn't she? She came to our house and she chose me. Flint felt the ice in his chest spread. Ren Callahan was not a random victim. She had been selected, evaluated, chosen. And if they had done it to her family, they had done it to others. Mr. Flint. Ren's voice was small but steady. There are other kids, like me. I heard them crying through the walls. You have to find them. She reached through the window and grabbed his hand. Promise, promise. Flint looked at this tiny warrior. This 6-year-old girl who had survived the unsurvivable through sheer force of will, who had not only saved herself, but was now thinking of the children she had left behind. Promise, promise. The truck pulled away. Ren's face in the window watching him until the taillights disappeared around the bend. Flint stood in the parking lot long after they were gone, the other bikers giving him space, understanding that some moments needed to be processed alone. Finally, he turned and walked back into the bar. Church, now. They gathered in the back room of the Iron Horse. 12 men around a worn wooden table. The door was closed and locked. This was where they made their serious decisions, away from prying eyes and ears. Flint stood at the head of the table, his massive hands flat against the scarred wood. What we saw today, what we found in that vehicle, this isn't over. Sable had her laptop open. I've been digging through Voss's phone records. 12 contacts in this network. Coded communications going back 18 months. At least 6 locations mentioned as transfer points across Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. Transfer points for what? Duke asked, though everyone already knew the answer. Kids. Sable's voice was flat, professional, but her hands were shaking slightly. They call them packages. They have a whole terminology, weight classes, condition ratings, delivery schedules. These people are running this like a business, like they're shipping merchandise. The silence that followed was heavy with fury. And the woman, Flint's voice was deadly quiet. Miriam Blake, Families First Montana. I'm already running her. Sable's fingers flew across the keyboard. If she's the scout, if she's the one who identifies targets, then she knows who else they're watching. Flint looked around the table at these men, his brothers, his family, his fellow monsters who fought other monsters. That little girl ran through our door because she believed someone would help her. She was right. He paused. And somewhere out there, other kids are waiting for someone to care enough to find them. His voice hardened to steel. I'm going to find them. The room was silent for a moment. Then Hawk spoke. We're going to find them. One by one, every man at the table nodded. Flint looked up at the ceiling. Through it. To whatever heaven might exist beyond. Hold on, Rosalie. We're just getting started. Outside, the Montana night was cool and clear. Stars blazed overhead. More stars than you could ever count. And somewhere in the darkness, a 6-year-old girl who had been brave enough to ask for help was finally falling asleep in her own bed. Safe. Loved. Home. 3 days after the rescue, Ren Callahan sat in an FBI field office conference room. Her legs dangled from a chair too big for her small body. The room smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects. Across the table, Agent Marlo Sinclair spread photographs and documents in neat rows. Behind her, a one-way mirror reflected Wren's pale face back at her. She knew people were watching from the other side. She could feel their eyes like heat on her skin. Eileen sat beside her daughter, one hand gripping Wren's so tightly it almost hurt. Declan stood against the wall with his arms crossed, his jaw tight with the effort of staying calm. Neither parent wanted their daughter here. Neither parent wanted to put her through more trauma. But Wren had insisted. "Mommy, there are other kids still with the bad men. I saw them. If I can help find them, I have to try." Those words spoken in her small, certain voice had ended the argument. Eileen had cried. Declan had punched a wall in the garage where he thought no one could hear. But in the end, they had agreed, because their daughter was right. Agent Sinclair leaned forward. Her voice was gentle but focused. "Wren, I want you to know that you're not in any trouble. Nothing you say here is wrong. We just need you to tell us what you remember. Whatever you remember. Even if it seems small or unimportant." Wren nodded. Her free hand found the edge of her shirt and twisted the fabric, a nervous habit she had developed since the abduction. "I remember everything." Her voice was quiet but steady. "I tried really hard to remember, because I knew someone would need to know." Sinclair exchanged a glance with the child psychologist seated in the corner, a woman named Dr. Ellen Crawford who specialized in trauma cases. The doctor gave a small nod. "Proceed. Let's start with the car. Can you describe it for me?" It was black, an SUV. The seats in the back were gone. There was a mattress instead, and metal rings on the floor. Wren paused, her small brow furrowing with concentration. The mattress was old. It smelled bad, like sweat and something sour. "Did you notice anything else? Any smells, sounds, things you could feel?" Wren closed her eyes, her face scrunching with the effort of pulling memories from places she would rather forget. "It smelled like medicine, like the stuff the doctor puts on your arm before a shot, and something sweet, like fake flowers. The bad man had that smell on him too, on his clothes." She opened her eyes. "And cigarettes, expensive ones, not like the ones my uncle smokes. These smelled different, fancier." Sinclair wrote something in her notebook. "What about sounds? Did you hear anything while you were in the car?" His phone rang a lot. He talked to people. Different people, I think, because his voice changed. Wren's jaw tightened with remembered anger. "Sometimes he was nice, like when he talked to me at the park. Sometimes he was scared. And sometimes," her voice dropped, "sometimes he was mean, really mean. He talked about packages and schedules and buyers. He said things like the Montana package is difficult and premium price, in the usual place." Eileen made a small sound of distress. Declan moved closer, putting his hand on his wife's shoulder. "Did you hear any names?" "Any places?" Wren thought hard, her eyes moving back and forth like she was reading something only she could see. "He said Helena once, and something about mountains that sleep, and big metal birds." "Big metal bird." "Airplanes, I saw them through the window when we stopped once. A lot of them, lined up in a row, but not at a regular airport. It was smaller, quieter." Sinclair's pen stopped moving. "A private airfield." Wren shrugged. "I don't know what that is, but it was where the big metal birds live, and there were mountains behind it that looked like giants sleeping on their backs." Sinclair pulled out a map of Montana and surrounding states. "Wren, can you show me approximately where you were when you saw the airplanes?" Wren studied the map with intense concentration. Her finger traced along the highways, stopping and starting as she tried to match the lines on paper with the blurred memories of 2 days in hell. "Here," she pointed to an area northeast of Helena. "I think the mountains look like this." She traced a shape in the air, a distinctive silhouette that Sinclair recognized immediately. The Sleeping Giant Range, a local landmark visible from several small airfields in the region. "That's very helpful, Wren. What else do you remember about the places you stopped?" "There were houses, different houses. He would leave me in the sometimes locked in, while he went inside. Her voice grew smaller. I could hear voices through the walls, other men, and sometimes she faltered. Sometimes I heard crying, kids crying, but I never saw them. You said earlier that you saw other kids. When was that? Ren's face clouded. At one house, I had to use the bathroom really bad. He took me inside and there was a hallway with doors. All of them were closed, but one was open a little. She stopped, her shoulders beginning to tremble. I saw through the crack. There were kids in there, 3 of them, I think, sitting on the floor. They looked at me and I looked at them. And then the bad man pulled me away and told me to forget what I saw. Eileen was crying now, silent tears running down her cheeks. Declan looked like he wanted to destroy something with his bare hands. Can you describe the children you saw? Sinclair asked softly. 2 girls and a boy. One girl had red hair and braids. The boy was little, maybe 4. The other girl was older than me. They all looked scared, really scared, and tired, like they hadn't slept in a long time. Sinclair made more notes. Ren, you're doing incredibly well. Just a few more questions. Did the bad man ever mention anyone else by name? Anyone he worked with or worked for? Ren thought hard. He called someone the boss. He was scared of the boss. You could hear it in his voice when he talked to him on the phone. She paused. And once, when he thought I was asleep, he said something about a woman. A woman? He said the scout did good work on this one. Tell her she'll get her bonus. She looked up at Sinclair. And then he laughed. The scout, Sinclair felt a chill run down her spine. The intelligence they had gathered from Flint Donovan pointed to someone named Miriam Blake as the one who identified targets. Now they had confirmation from the only witness who had survived long enough to talk. One more thing, Ren, this is very important. Did you ever hear the bad man give a specific time or date for anything? Anything about when something was supposed to happen? Ren's brow furrowed. He said 11 packages Thursday night. And I remember because 11 is my lucky number. It's how old my cousin is. And Thursday is when my daddy used to take me for ice cream before. She trailed off. Before this happened. Sinclair set down her pen. Ren, you've been more helpful than you know. The information you've given us could help save other children. You're very brave. Ren looked up at her with a gaze that carried weight beyond her years. I'm not brave. Brave means you're not scared. I was scared the whole time. I'm still scared now. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, Sinclair said gently. Being brave means doing the right thing even when you're terrified, and that's exactly what you did. Ren considered this. That's what Mr. Flint said. He said I was the bravest kid he ever met. Mr. Donovan is a wise man. He lost his daughter. Did you know that she was taken by bad men too, a long time ago? That's why he helps kids now, because he couldn't help her. Sinclair's expression softened. I know, and I think his daughter would be very proud of what he's doing, just like your parents are proud of you. The interview should have ended there, but Ren was not finished. I want to draw something. She looked at the box of crayons that Dr. Crawford had brought for the art therapy portion of the session. Can I draw the lady, the one who came to our house before? Eileen's face went pale. Sweetheart, you don't have to. I want to. I remember her face. I remember exactly what she looked like. If I draw her, maybe you can find her. And then she can't pick any more kids. Sinclair looked at Crawford. The psychologist gave a slight nod. If you want to draw Ren, that would be very helpful. They gave her paper and crayons. For 20 minutes, Ren worked in complete silence, her small tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth, her brow furrowed with concentration. When she finally held up the drawing, the room went still. It was crude as all children's drawings are, but it was unmistakable. A woman with brown hair and a wide smile, wearing professional clothes, holding a clipboard, and written in careful crayon letters at the top. The lady who came to our house before the bad man took me. Eileen's hand flew to her mouth. That's her. That's exactly what she looked like. Declan stared at the drawing. She sat in our kitchen, drank our coffee, looked at our daughter like she was... He could not finish the sentence. Sinclair took the drawing carefully. Ren, you drew this before anyone showed you any photographs, before anyone told you what this woman's name was. Ren nodded. Yeah, I remember faces. I always have. Grandma May says I have a camera in my head. This could be exactly what we need to identify her. Wren looked at the agent with quiet determination. Her name is Miriam Blake. My mommy has her business card. She works for Families First Montana. She goes to people's houses and asks questions about their kids. She paused. And then the bad men come and take them. The drawing of Miriam Blake was compared to employee records within hours. Perfect match. Sable had been running her own investigation from the Iron Horse, cross-referencing Miriam Blake's public appearances with the dates of child disappearances across the region. The results were damning. Over 3 years, Blake had visited more than 200 families through her charity work. Of those families, 17 had children go missing within 6 months of her visit. 17 children. Some classified as runaways, some as custody disputes. Some simply vanished without explanation. All of them under 10 years old, all of them from vulnerable families, single mothers, parents working multiple jobs, people too exhausted and overwhelmed to ask questions when a nice woman from a charity organization offered help. Flint stared at the data on Sable's laptop. She's been shopping for kids, going door to door, picking out the ones who won't be missed. Or won't be believed, Sable's voice was flat. Think about it. She visits a struggling family, takes notes on everything, the kids' schedule, the parents' work hours, who watches them after school, whether there are neighbors who might notice something wrong. She scrolled through more records. She's not just identifying targets. She's doing reconnaissance, building a complete profile of each family's vulnerabilities, and passing that information to the handlers, who then know exactly when and where to grab the kid with minimum risk. Flint's hands curled into fists. Where is she now? Still operating, she has no idea we're on to her. Sable pulled up a calendar. In fact, she's scheduled to speak at a community event this weekend. Topic: protecting your children from predators. The irony was so dark it felt like a physical weight. Flint was about to respond when his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Mr. Donovan. The voice was smooth, cultured, confident. The voice of someone who had never faced real consequences. My name is Preston Hale. I believe you have been looking for me. Flint's jaw tightened. Where are the children? Safe for now, which is more than I can say for you and your associates. Is this the part where you threaten my family? My club? Because I've got to tell you, we've heard it all before. Preston Hale laughed softly. I don't threaten, Mr. Donovan. I inform. And what I'm informing you is that you're playing a game you don't understand. He paused. The network you've stumbled into has been operating for decades. It has protection at every level of government. The FBI agent you've been working with, her supervisor, has been on our payroll for 5 years. How do you think we've operated so long without interference? Every network has weak points. True, you found one. Aldrich Voss, careless man, left too many traces. But eliminating one courier doesn't damage the infrastructure. We'll have a replacement within weeks. And the scout Miriam Blake, a liability who's outlived her usefulness. We're already making arrangements. Flint felt the ice spread through his chest. What do you want, Hale? To offer you a choice. Walk away now. Disband your little investigation. Return to your motorcycles and your bar, and we'll consider the matter closed. His voice hardened. Continue and we'll dismantle everything you've built. Your club, your reputation, your freedom. We have enough planted evidence to put you away for life. And the children, not your concern. Flint looked across the room where Sable was listening, where his brothers sat waiting. These men who had become his family. These monsters who fought other monsters. Let me make you a counteroffer. His voice was quiet, deadly. Release those children within 48 hours, or I will personally put you in the ground. Not a threat, not a promise, a guarantee. You're in no position to 48 hours, Hale, starting now. He hung up and crushed the phone under his boot. The club meeting that night was tense. Everyone had heard about the call. Everyone understood what it meant. They know we're coming, Ranger said. They know, and they're not running, which means they think they can handle us. Or they're setting a trap. Hawk's voice was grim. We go after that Wyoming compound, we might be walking into an ambush. We can't just do nothing. Duke slammed his fist on the table. There are kids in there. You heard what Wren said. She saw them through a door, scared, crying, waiting for someone to help them. And if we get killed trying to help them, what then? The network keeps operating. More kids disappear. Our families become targets. The argument went back and forth. Strategy versus urgency. Caution versus action. Flint let them talk. Let the frustration and fear work itself out. Finally, he spoke. We're thinking about this wrong. Everyone turned to look at him. Hale called me because he's scared. If he wasn't scared, he wouldn't have bothered. He would have just moved against us without warning. Flint stood and walked to the window. He's trying to buy time. That means there's something happening soon that he doesn't want us to interfere with. 11 packages, Thursday night, Sable said slowly. That's what Wren remembered. What day is it? Tuesday. So we have less than 48 hours to find out where those 11 children are being moved. And stop it. The door to the meeting room opened. Everyone tensed, hands moving toward weapons. But it was just Eileen Callahan, standing in the doorway with Wren holding her hand. I'm sorry to interrupt. Eileen's voice was tight, but Wren insisted. She said she needs to tell you something. Flint crossed the room in 3 strides. What is it, little bird? Wren looked up at him, her face pale but determined. The lady, Miriam Blake. You're going to catch her, right? We're working on it. She's going to talk to people this weekend about protecting kids. I heard Mommy and Daddy talking about it. Flint nodded. We know, but she doesn't know I drew her picture. Wren's chin lifted with defiance. She doesn't know I can prove she came to our house before the bad man took me. She looked around the room at the scarred faces and leather vests. I have an idea. The room went quiet. What kind of idea, sweetheart? My picture, the one I drew for the FBI lady. If people saw it at that meeting, if they knew what she really does. Wren's voice was steady. She couldn't hide anymore. Everyone would know her face. Everyone would know she picks kids for the bad men. Eileen made a sound of protest. Wren, honey, you can't. I don't have to be there, Mommy. Just my picture. And the truth. She looked at Flint. You could do it. You and your friends. You could show everyone what she really is. Flint crouched down to her level. That's a dangerous plan, little bird. If we expose her publicly, the people she works for will know we're getting close. Good. Wren's voice was fierce. Let them know. Let them be scared for once. She grabbed his hand. Mr. Flint, I heard the bad man on the phone. He was scared of the boss, really scared. But I wasn't scared of him. Not when I ran, not when I asked for help. She squeezed his fingers. He's scared of me now. I know he is, because I got away, because I can tell people what he did. Her eyes burned with something that looked like fire. And if he's scared, then the boss should be scared too. They should all be scared, because I'm not going to stop until every kid they took is home safe. The room was absolutely silent. Flint looked at this tiny warrior, this 6-year-old girl who had survived the unsurvivable, who had not only escaped but was now planning the counterattack. You're something else, Wren Callahan. I know. She said it without arrogance, just simple certainty. That's what my grandma says. Flint stood and looked at his brothers. You heard the lady. We've got work to do. The Riverside Community Center was packed. 200 people had registered to attend Miriam Blake's presentation on protecting children from predators. Parents and grandparents and teachers and coaches, all of them there to learn from an expert. None of them knew the expert was the danger. Flint arrived early with Ranger, Sable, and Hawk. They wore civilian clothes, nothing to identify them as club members. They positioned themselves strategically around the room, watching exits, monitoring the crowd. Miriam Blake was already there, setting up her presentation at the front of the room, moving with confident efficiency, adjusting her laptop, arranging handouts, chatting warmly with early arrivals. The perfect image of a caring community advocate. Flint watched her and felt his stomach turn. This woman had sat in Eileen Callahan's kitchen, had played with Wren's hair, asked questions about her school and her routine, smiled and nodded and taken mental notes, notes she later passed to men who sold children. And in 30 minutes, she was going to stand up and tell these parents how to protect their kids. The room filled steadily. At 2 o'clock precisely, Miriam Blake stepped up to the microphone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I know Saturday afternoons are precious, especially for busy parents. But there's nothing more important than the safety of our children. And that's exactly what we're here to discuss. Her voice was warm, engaging, practiced. She had clearly given this presentation many times. The most dangerous predators are often the ones who seem most trustworthy. They don't look like monsters. They look like neighbors, coaches, family friends. She smiled at the audience. They infiltrate our communities. They build relationships. They gain access. Flint felt sick. Every word was true, and every word was a description of exactly what she did. For 40 minutes, Miriam Blake talked about internet safety, stranger danger, teaching children to recognize inappropriate behavior. She used statistics and case studies and real-world examples. She answered questions thoughtfully and at length. She was very good at this. When the question and answer portion began, Sable raised her hand. Miss Blake, you mentioned that Families First does home assessments for vulnerable families. Can you tell us more about what that involves? Miriam Blake smiled. Of course. We visit families who might need support services. We evaluate their situation, housing stability, childcare arrangements, support networks, and connect them with appropriate resources. It's all about making sure every family has what they need to thrive. And you keep records of these assessments. Naturally, everything is documented and confidential. How do you ensure that information stays confidential? Sable pressed. Detailed information about family vulnerabilities, children's schedules, support networks. That kind of data could be very valuable to the wrong people. Miriam Blake's smile flickered. All our records are strictly protected. Only authorized staff have access. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm just curious about your data security protocols. As Sable's voice was steady, after all information about vulnerable children, it would be terrible if that fell into the wrong hands. The room had gone quiet. People were looking between Sable and Miriam Blake with growing unease. I can assure you, Miriam Blake, said her voice cooling, that Families First maintains the highest ethical standards. Now, are there any other questions? A man in the back raised his hand. Ranger, I've got one, a friend of mine. Her family was visited by your organization about 2 years ago. Nice woman came to their house, asked a lot of questions about their kids. He paused. 6 months later, their 8-year-old daughter went missing. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Miriam Blake's face went pale. I'm very sorry to hear about that, but I don't see how. What's strange is that the police barely investigated, classified it as a runaway. Ranger's voice was hard. An 8-year-old runaway. Does that sound right to you? I really can't comment on individual cases. How about 17 cases? The room went dead silent. Hawk stood up, holding a folder. We've been doing some research. 17 children from families your organization assessed have gone missing in the past 3 years, all within 6 months of your home visits, all barely investigated. His eyes bored into Miriam Blake. That's a hell of a coincidence, don't you think? This is outrageous. Miriam Blake's composure cracked. You're making baseless accusations. Are they baseless? Flint spoke for the first time, his voice carrying through the room. Because we have documentation. Financial ties between your nonprofit and shell companies linked to trafficking operations. Records of you accessing confidential county files without authorization. He held up his phone, showing the photograph of Wren's drawing. And we have this, a picture drawn by a 6-year-old girl who was abducted from Riverside Park 2 weeks ago. She drew it before anyone told her your name, before she knew you were connected to what happened to her. The room erupted. Parents were on their feet, shouting questions, demanding answers. Some were already on their phones, calling police, calling lawyers, calling anyone who might listen. Miriam Blake grabbed her purse and headed for the exit. I don't have to listen to this. This is slander. I'm calling my lawyer. Call whoever you want, Flint said. But the FBI already has copies of everything. Agent Sinclair is very interested in talking to you. Miriam Blake froze at the door. For just a second, her mask dropped completely, and Flint saw the real person underneath. Cold, calculating, cornered. Then she was gone, practically running to her car. The room descended into chaos. Parents demanding answers from anyone who would listen. Local officials being cornered and questioned. Phones recording everything. Flint slipped out the side door. Hawk was waiting. She's making calls. Panic calls from the look of it. Good, let her panic. Let her reach out to her contacts. Every call she makes gives us more information. You think she'll run? Probably, but it doesn't matter. The story's out now. Even if she disappears, the investigation continues. Flint looked back at the community center. Wren's plan worked. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You've made powerful enemies, people who can make your club disappear. Step back now and you'll be rewarded. Continue and everyone you love will suffer. Flint stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed his reply. Come try. The threats escalated. Over the next 48 hours, Flint received more messages. Photographs of the Iron Horse Tavern taken from across the street at night. A picture of his house. A picture of the Callahan home with a single word underneath. Careful. He showed them to the club at their emergency meeting. They're trying to scare us off. And it's working, Duke admitted. My wife wants me to step back. Says she didn't sign up for this. Nobody's judging anyone who wants out, Flint said. This isn't club business. It's personal. If you need to protect your family. My family is protected by finishing this. Ranger interrupted. These people traffic children. You think they'll stop at threats. You think backing down makes us safe. Hawk nodded. Ranger's right. We're already in this. Only way out is through. Flint looked around the table. Every man present. Every man committed. Then we escalate. He turned to Sable. Raven, what do we have on that Wyoming property? Sable pulled up satellite images on her laptop. Remote location, about 40 miles from the nearest town. Property records show it's owned by Mountain Vista Holdings. Same shell company connected to Blake and the network. She zoomed in on the images. Recent construction includes a reinforced main building and what looks like underground additions. Underground, Hawk repeated. Why would they need underground space? Nobody answered. Nobody wanted to. FBI's got the information now, Ranger said. Agent Sinclair seems solid. They'll handle it. Will they? Sable's voice was skeptical. How long have they been tracking these people? 2 years more. And what have they got to show for it? She shook her head. They've got jurisdictional issues. These operations work across state lines specifically because it creates bureaucratic tangles. By the time federal and state and local agencies coordinate, the targets have moved. That's by design. Flint had been quiet, thinking. Now he spoke. Agent Sinclair told me something after Wren was rescued. She said if we hear anything, contact her directly. Not local police. Her. He pulled out the business card she had given him. I think what she really meant was, we can go places they can't, do things they can't, help us. And if helping means crossing lines, Hawk asked quietly. Flint's jaw tightened. Then we decide case by case. But today, a 6-year-old girl ran through our door because she thought the scary bikers might be less dangerous than the man chasing her. His voice hardened. She was right. And somewhere out there, other kids are waiting for someone to care enough to find them. His phone buzzed. A text from Eileen Callahan. Wren needs to talk to you. Says it's important. Can you come? Flint arrived at the Callahan house within the hour. The sun was setting, painting the Montana sky in shades of orange and purple, the mountains turning to black silhouettes against the dying light. Eileen met him at the door, her face tight with worry. She's been like this all day, drawing and writing and refusing to eat. She says she remembered something else. Flint found Wren in her bedroom. She was surrounded by papers, drawings and maps and crude diagrams spread across every surface. Her crayon was worn down to a stub, her small fingers stained with color. Mr. Flint, she looked up at him, her eyes red from crying but blazing with determination. I remembered something important. Flint crouched down to her level. What is it, little bird? The mountains, the ones that looked like sleeping giants. I saw them when we stopped at the place with the airplanes. She grabbed one of her drawings, a crude but recognizable sketch of a mountain range. I've been trying to draw them exactly right. Because if you can find the mountains, you can find where they took me. She pointed to specific features. This one has two bumps like a camel. This one is flat on top like someone cut it with a knife. And this one, she traced a distinctive shape. This one looks like a person lying on their back with their arms crossed. Flint stared at the drawing. You remember all this from looking through a car window? Wren nodded. I remember everything. Grandma May says I have a camera in my head. I just had to find the right picture. She grabbed another paper. And there's more. The bad man talked about 11 packages on Thursday night, at the usual place. He said the boss would be there this time, because it was an important shipment. Her small voice trembled. Mr. Flint, there are 11 kids, like me, and they're going to be moved on Thursday to somewhere bad, where no one will ever find them. She grabbed his hand. You have to stop it. Flint looked at this tiny warrior, at the maps and drawings spread around her, at the fierce intelligence burning in her eyes, at the determination that had kept her alive through 47 hours of hell. Can I take these drawings? Show them to my friends? Wren nodded eagerly. Yes, take all of them. I made extra copies in case you needed them. She had made copies. 6 years old, and she had made copies of her evidence. Wren, how did you know to make wires? Because that's what they do on the police shows Daddy watches. They always make copies of the important stuff. Flint almost laughed. You're going to make one hell of a detective someday. I'm going to make one hell of a biker, Wren said with absolute certainty. When I grow up, I'm going to ride motorcycles and save kids, like you. This time Flint did laugh. I believe you will, little bird. I believe you will. Back at the Iron Horse, Sable spread Wren's drawings across the table. The kid's got a photographic memory. Look at these details. She pulled up satellite images on her laptop. I've been comparing her mountain sketches to terrain maps of the region. The distinctive features she drew. The two humps, the flat top, the sleeping figure. She pointed to a specific location on the screen. There's only one place where all three of those shapes are visible together from a low angle. She zoomed in. A private airfield northeast of Helena, about 40 minutes from the Wyoming compound. Ranger leaned forward. That matches what she told the FBI. Big metal birds, mountains that sleep. And look at this. Sable pulled up flight records. There's a charter flight scheduled to depart from that airfield Thursday night at 2200 hours. Destination, a private facility in Nevada. Nevada? Hawk's voice was grim. What kind of facility? The kind that doesn't ask questions. The kind where packages can be processed and distributed without interference. The room went silent. 11 kids. Flint's voice was barely a whisper. Loaded onto a plane, flown to Nevada, and then scattered to buyers across the country, maybe across the world. And we can't let that happen. We won't. Flint straightened. Raven, I need everything you can find on that airfield. Security, personnel, access points, flight manifests. Ranger, reach out to your contacts. Anyone who might know something about this operation. Hawk, start planning tactical options. We need multiple approaches depending on what we find. He looked around the table. Thursday night, that's our deadline. 48 hours to plan, to prepare, to make sure those kids come home. His phone rang. Agent Sinclair. Mr. Donovan, we need to talk. I'm listening. The Wyoming compound. We sent a team to investigate based on your information. It was empty. Flint's gut clenched. Empty. Cleared out. Evidence of hasty evacuation. But nothing useful left behind. They knew we were coming. How? I don't know, but I have my suspicions. Her voice dropped. My supervisor, Collins. He's been blocking warrant applications, delaying information sharing, creating bureaucratic obstacles at every turn. You think he's the leak? I think someone in the Bureau is feeding information to the network, and I think they're trying to shut down this investigation before we get too close. Flint felt the ice spread through his chest. What does that mean for us? It means be careful. Whatever you're planning, whatever you think you know, don't share it with anyone in law enforcement. Not until we know who we can trust. She paused. And Mr. Donovan, if you happen to find something before we do something that might lead to those children, I'll call you. Call me directly, no one else, day or night. Understood. He ended the call and turned to face his brothers. The Wyoming compound was cleared. They knew the FBI was coming. There's a leak inside the bureau. So we can't trust the feds, Ranger said. We can trust Sinclair. Maybe, but no one else. Flint picked up one of Wren's drawings. The sleeping giant mountains rendered in careful crayon strokes by a 6-year-old girl who refused to give up. We do this ourselves, Thursday night. We hit that airfield before the children are loaded onto the plane. And if we're wrong, if the intel is bad, then we deal with it, but I'm not wrong. He held up the drawing. Because a little girl with a camera in her head told me exactly where to look. And I'm not going to let her down. Wednesday night, less than 24 hours before the operation, Wren Callahan could not sleep. She lay in her bed staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars her father had stuck to the ceiling 3 years ago. Back when her biggest fear was the monster under the bed. Now she knew the real monsters wore polo shirts and drove nice cars and smiled at you in parks. The house was quiet. Her parents had gone to bed hours ago, but Wren could hear her mother's restless movements through the wall. Eileen was not sleeping either. None of them slept well anymore. Wren pushed back her unicorn comforter and slipped out of bed. Her bare feet made no sound on the hardwood floor as she crossed to her desk, the small one her father had built for her 6th birthday, decorated with carved flowers along the edges. She pulled out a box of crayons and a stack of construction paper. For the next 2 hours, she wrote letters. Dear kid. The first one began in careful 6-year-old handwriting. My name is Wren. I was scared like you. But I got away. Help is coming for you too. Be brave. You are not alone. She wrote 11 letters, one for each child she knew was waiting in the darkness. She did not know their names. She did not know if they were boys or girls, if they liked dinosaurs or princesses, if they had dogs or cats or goldfish waiting for them at home. But she knew they were scared. She knew they were hoping someone would come. And she knew that hope was the thing that kept you alive when everything else wanted you dead. By the time the sun began to light the Montana sky, Wren had a stack of letters, each one folded carefully into a small square, each one carrying words she wished someone had said to her during those 47 hours of terror. She heard her mother's footsteps in the hallway and quickly gathered the letters, stuffing them into her backpack alongside her favorite stuffed elephant. Wren mocked. Eileen appeared in the doorway, her face soft with worry. What are you doing up so early? I couldn't sleep. Eileen crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, pulling Wren into her arms. Me neither, baby. Me neither. They sat together in the growing light, mother and daughter, waiting for the day that would change everything. The airfield emerged from the darkness like a wound in the Montana landscape. Flint lay flat against the cold ground, binoculars pressed to his eyes. Watching, waiting, counting the seconds until everything changed. The facility was smaller than he expected, a single runway cutting through scrubland, 2 hangars squatting at the edge of the tarmac, a cluster of outbuildings connected by gravel paths, and in the center, a main structure that looked like it had once been an administrative office. Chain-link fence surrounded the perimeter, topped with a razor wire that gleamed in the moonlight like the teeth of some sleeping beast. Rangers' reconnaissance had been accurate. 2 guards at the main gate, 3 more patrolling in irregular patterns. The dogs that had been present at the Wyoming compound were absent tonight, probably deemed unnecessary for a quick operation. Their mistake. Flint checked his watch. 21:45, 15 minutes until the chartered flight was scheduled to depart. 15 minutes to save 11 children. His earpiece crackled. Alpha team in position. Ranger's voice was calm, controlled. The voice of a man who had done this kind of work before, in places far more dangerous than a private airfield in Montana. Bravo team ready, Hawk reported. Charlie standing by for extraction. Sable's voice came through clear. She was positioned half a mile away with the transport vehicles, medical supplies loaded, blankets and water and everything else those children might need. Flint took one more look through the binoculars. Through the windows of the main building, he could see movement, figures rushing around inside, preparing for something. And there in a back room, visible through a partially open door, he saw what he had come for. Children, at least 10 of them, maybe more, huddled together on a bare concrete floor, small bodies pressed against each other for comfort, small faces pale with fear. The oldest looked maybe 9. The youngest could not have been more than 4. Flint felt something break open in his chest. Rage and sorrow and determination all fused together into something that burned hotter than any fire. Alpha Team, I have eyes on the packages. Rear building, east side, approximately 10 to 12 children. 2 adult hostiles visible. Bravo copies, perimeter secure. All external guards neutralized. Rangers team had done their work. Charlie standing by for extraction. Vehicles ready. Flint took a breath. All teams, execute on my mark. He counted down in his head. 3, 2, 1, go. They hit the front entrance at exactly 21:47. Hawk went through first, his massive frame filling the doorway like a force of nature. The first guard reached for his weapon and found himself on the floor before his hand touched the grip. Hawk's boot on his chest, a very large fist connecting with his jaw. Stay down! The guard stayed down. Flint and Ranger cleared the front room, moving with the precision of men who had trained for moments exactly like this. 2 more guards, both neutralized before they could raise an alarm. Zip ties secured their wrists, duct tape covered their mouths. Clear, Ranger reported. They moved deeper into the building. The hallway was dark, lit only by emergency lights that cast everything in shades of red, like walking through the blood vessels of some enormous beast. Doors lined both sides, most of them closed. Flint's heart pounded as he approached the one he had seen through the window. He could hear crying now, soft, muffled. The sobs of children who had learned that loud sounds brought punishment. He positioned himself beside the door. Ranger took the other side. Hawk covered their backs. 3, 2, 1. Ranger kicked the door open. Flint went through, weapon up, scanning for threats. 1 guard standing near the far wall. Automatic rifle swinging toward the children. Finger moving toward the trigger. Flint did not hesitate. His shot took the man in the shoulder, spinning him away from the kids before he could bring his weapon to bear. A second shot, lower, dropped him to the ground with a scream that echoed off the concrete walls. Threat down, room secure. And then Flint saw them clearly for the first time. 13 children. Not 11, 13, bound hands, gagged mouths, eyes wide with terror that went beyond words. They ranged in age from about 4 to maybe 10. Some were crying, others had gone silent and still. The dangerous stillness of children who had learned that survival meant invisibility. Sable came through the door behind him, moving past the men with quiet purpose. It's okay. Her voice was soft but steady. It's okay. You're safe now. We're here to take you home. She knelt among the children, cutting zip ties, removing gags, gathering the smallest ones into her arms with an instinct that transcended everything else. My name is Sable. This is my friend Flint. We're going to get you out of here. Your mommies and daddies are waiting for you. Everything is going to be okay. A little girl with red braids looked up at Sable. Her eyes held far too much knowledge for her age. Are you angels? Sable's voice caught. Something like that, sweetheart. Something like that. Flint pulled out the voice recorder Wren had given him. Listen to this. He pressed play. Wren's voice filled the room, small and fierce and absolutely unbreakable. My name is Wren. I was taken by bad men too, but I got away, and now help is coming for you. Be brave. Don't give up. You're going to be okay. The children listened, their faces shifting, the terror giving way to something else. Hope. The girl with red braids started crying, but differently now. Relief instead of fear. She sounds like us, another child whispered. She got away. And so will you, Sable said. Right now, tonight, we're taking you home. Ranger's voice crackled through the earpiece. Alpha, we've got company. Vehicle approaching from the north. High-end sedan, 1 passenger in the back. Flint's jaw tightened. Preston Hale. The boss had arrived. Of course he had. The database said he was overseeing this shipment personally. Too much money on the line to trust subordinates with such valuable cargo. Bravo, intercept and detain, non-lethal if possible. Copy that. Flint turned back to the room, to the 13 children being freed from their restraints. Raven, get them to the extraction point. I'll handle Hale. Sable looked up, her face hard. Flint, go. Those kids are the priority. Get them safe. She nodded and began guiding the children toward the rear exit, her voice a constant stream of comfort and encouragement, telling them about the warm blankets waiting in the vans, about the hot chocolate and the soft music in the long drive home. Flint moved toward the front of the building. He found Preston Hale in the main room, held at gunpoint by Ranger and Duke. The businessman looked exactly as Flint had imagined. Expensive suit, manicured hands, the smug expression of a man who believed his money and connections made him untouchable. That expression flickered when he saw Flint approach. "Mr. Donovan," his voice was smooth, controlled, showing no signs of fear despite his situation. "I must say I'm impressed. I didn't think you had the resources for something like this." "Shut up." Flint crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of Hale. The man was shorter than he expected, smaller, the mastermind of an empire built on stolen children. And he looked like any middle-aged businessman you might pass on the street. "Do you know what I've spent the last 20 years doing?" Flint asked quietly. "I imagine you were about to tell me." "I've spent 20 years living with the fact that I couldn't save my daughter. 20 years wondering what her last moments were like, whether she called for me, whether she died hoping her daddy would come." Hale's smile tightened. "Tragic, truly. But I fail to see how—" Flint's fist connected with Hale's face before the man could finish his sentence. The businessman crumpled, blood streaming from his nose, his expensive suit suddenly looking much less impressive. "That's for Rosalie." He hit him again. "That's for Wren." And again. "And that's for every child you've ever touched." Ranger put a hand on Flint's shoulder. "Flint, that's enough. He's done." Flint stood over the groaning man, his chest heaving, his knuckles split and bleeding. The rage that had sustained him for 20 years was burning itself out, leaving something else in its place. Not peace, not yet, but maybe the beginning of peace. "Get him secured. The FBI will want him alive." He turned away and walked toward the rear of the building, toward the sounds of children's voices and Sable's steady reassurances. Outside, the night was cool and clear. Stars blazed overhead, more stars than you could ever count. The extraction vehicles were waiting, their engines running, doors open. Sable was loading children into the vans one by one, counting heads, making sure no one was left behind. 13, she reported as Flint approached. "All 13, plus 2 more we found in a side room, 15 total." 15 children, saved from whatever fate Preston Hale had planned for them, saved from becoming another statistic, another cold case, another family destroyed. "Any injuries?" "Minor dehydration, some bruising. They'll need medical attention and a lot of therapy." She paused. "But they're alive. They're going to be okay." Flint nodded slowly. "Let's get them out of here, bitch." He pulled out his phone and dialed Agent Sinclair. "It's done. 15 children. All safe. Hale is in custody. We're heading to the rally point now." A long pause on the other end. 15, the database said 11. "We found more. Hidden in a side room." Another pause. "My team is 20 minutes out. Hold position if you can. We'll be here." He ended the call and looked at the vans full of children, at the brothers who had risked everything to save them, at the stars wheeling overhead in their eternal dance. "We did it," Hawk said, appearing at his shoulder. "We actually did it. Not yet. Not until those kids are home with their families. Not until Hale is behind bars. Not until every piece of this network is burned to the ground." But something had shifted. Something that had been frozen for 20 years was finally beginning to thaw. "Hey, mister." Flint turned to find the little girl with red braids looking up at him from the back of one of the vans. Her face was dirty. Her eyes were haunted. But there was something else there too. Something that looked like hope. "Yes, sweetheart. Are we really going home?" Flint crouched down to her level. "Yes, you're really going home. I promise." The girl smiled, small and tentative, like a flower opening after a long frost. "Thank you for coming for us." "You're welcome, sweetheart. You're very welcome." Flint reached into his pocket and pulled out the stack of letters. "I have something for you, for all of you, from a very brave little girl who wanted you to know you weren't alone." He handed her the first letter. The girl unfolded it carefully, her lips moving as she read the careful crayon handwriting. "Dear kid, my name is Wren. I was scared like you, but I got away. Help is coming for you, too. Be brave. You are not alone. Tears streamed down her face. She was like us. She understands. She does, and she's waiting to meet all of you. The FBI arrived 18 minutes later. Agent Sinclair was first on the scene, her face tight with a mixture of relief and professional concern. Jesus Christ, she breathed, taking in the scope of the operation. You actually pulled it off. Told you I would. Hale's inside, a little banged up, but he'll live. He resisted arrest. Sinclair's eyebrow rose. Vigorously. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. I'm sure the official report will reflect that. The next few hours were controlled case. Federal agents processing the scene, paramedics examining children, statements being taken, evidence being cataloged, local police arriving, then state police, then more federal agents as the scope of the operation became clear. Through it all, Flint stayed close to the children, watching over them, making sure they knew they were safe, answering their questions as honestly as he could. Where's my mommy? She's coming, sweetheart. She's coming as fast as she can. Is the bad man going to hurt us again? Never, I promise he's never going to hurt anyone again. Are you a policeman? No, I'm just someone who cares about kids. The reunions began around midnight. Parents arrived in a steady stream, faces pale with hope and terror, not quite believing until they held their children in their arms. The sounds they made. These mothers and fathers meeting their stolen children. Joy and grief and relief all tangled together into something that transcended words. Flint watched from a distance, giving the families their privacy, feeling the weight of 20 years beginning to lift from his shoulders. Agent Sinclair found him as dawn began to light the sky. 15 children recovered, 9 arrests, enough evidence to bring down the entire Northwest operation. She paused. And Hale is talking, trying to cut a deal by giving up his contacts. Is it working? Not a chance. The DA wants to make an example of him. Life without parole. Minimum. Flint nodded slowly. And my people? What people? Sinclair looked at him steadily. I don't see any people, just a bunch of concerned citizens who happened to be in the area when federal agents needed assistance. That's a generous interpretation. It's the only interpretation that matters. She handed him a card. If you hear anything else, anything at all, you contact me directly. I will. She started to walk away, then stopped. Donovan. Yeah, those children are alive because of you. Whatever happens next, don't forget that. 6 months later, Flint sat in a federal courtroom, watching Preston Hale face justice. The trial had been a marathon, weeks of testimony, evidence, legal maneuvering. The defense had tried everything, challenging evidence, questioning witnesses, attempting to paint Hale as a legitimate businessman who had been framed by criminal elements. None of it worked. The testimony of the rescued children delivered via video to protect their identities was devastating. Small voices describing horrors that no child should ever know. Parents sobbing in the gallery, jurors wiping their eyes. And then Ren Callahan took the stand. She was 7 now. A little taller, a little more confident, but with the same steady knowing gaze that had looked at Flint in the Iron Horse Tavern and asked for help. The defense attorney approached her with the condescending smile of someone who thought he could intimidate a child. Miss Callahan, you were only 6 years old when these alleged events occurred. Isn't it possible that your memory is unreliable? Ren looked at him steadily. I was 6, but I remember everything. Everything, that's a very strong claim for a young child. You were scared, confused, possibly drugged. How can we trust? I remember the smell of his car. Ren interrupted. Medicine and fake flowers. I remember the sound of his voice on the phone saying premium price like I was a toy at a store. I remember the other kids' faces through the crack in the door when we stopped at houses. I remember being so scared I couldn't breathe. Her voice held steady throughout. I remember running into a bar full of bikers because I knew I needed help and I wasn't afraid to ask for it. I remember the motorcycle man promising to keep me safe. She turned and looked directly at Preston Hale. He sat at the defense table, trying to maintain his composure, trying to project the image of a wrongly accused businessman. But his hands were shaking. I remember you too, Ren said. Not your face, but your voice. You're the boss. The one the bad man was scared of. The one who decided which kids were worth the most money. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Your lawyer says my memory isn't reliable. He says I'm just a confused little girl who doesn't know what she saw. Ren's chin lifted. But I know exactly what I saw. I know exactly what I heard. I know exactly what you did. And I'm not afraid of you. She paused. You didn't scare me at the park. You didn't scare me in that car. You didn't scare me in that warehouse. Her eyes burned into his. You don't scare me now. And you're never going to scare any other kid ever again. The courtroom remained frozen. The defense attorney opened his mouth to respond, but the judge cut him off. I think that's quite enough, a counselor. The witness may step down. Ren walked past the defense table, past Preston Hale, and stopped. My grandma used to say that the scariest looking people sometimes have the kindest hearts, and the nicest looking people are sometimes the real monsters. She looked at Hale one last time. She was right. The verdict came after 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts, 67 charges spanning trafficking, conspiracy, bribery, and murder. Life without parole. When the verdict was read, Preston Hale finally broke. The mask of the confident businessman crumbled, revealing the desperate, pathetic man beneath. You don't understand, he screamed at the judge, at the jury, at anyone who would listen. I have connections. I have protection. This isn't over. But it was over. Flint watched as the guards dragged Hale from the courtroom, his screams echoing off the marble walls until the heavy doors closed behind him. In the gallery, the families of rescued children held each other and wept. And somewhere in the crowd, a 7-year-old girl who had started it all smiled and squeezed her mother's hand. The letter arrived 6 weeks after the trial. It was delivered to the Iron Horse Tavern, addressed simply to Flint Donovan. No return address, just a plain white envelope with neat handwriting. Inside was a single page. Mr. Donovan, by the time you read this, I'll be dead. I'm taking the coward's way out because I can't face what I've done. I can't face the families of all the children that I failed to save. My name is Thaddeus Ashford. For 20 years, I was an FBI agent. For 15 of those years, I was also a traitor. You asked once through Agent Sinclair why I did it, why I helped the people who destroyed children's lives. The answer is simple. I did it because I was afraid, because I thought protecting my daughter meant surrendering to the people who took her. 20 years ago, I was investigating a trafficking case. I got too close. They took my daughter, Emily. She was 8 years old. They sent me a video and a message, back off, or she dies. I backed off. I buried the case. I thought I could save her. They killed her anyway. And then they owned me, 20 years of covering up their crimes, because I couldn't face what had happened to Emily, because they had proof of my failure, and I was too much of a coward to let the world see it. Your daughter Rosalie would be 34 this year. Emily would be 28. They'll never grow up, never fall in love, never have children of their own. And I could have stopped the people who killed them. I had the power, the position, the information, but I was too broken to use it. You weren't broken. You turned your grief into something that saved lives. I turned mine into something that destroyed them. If there's a hell, I'm going to it, and I deserve every minute. Thaddeus Ashford. P.S. There's a safety deposit box at Helena First National Bank. Key is taped to the back of this letter. Inside, you'll find everything I never had the courage to use. Names, dates, operations, the complete architecture of the network. And one more thing, something I should have told you years ago. I know where your daughter is buried. Pine Ridge Cemetery, Plot 847, Section C. I'm sorry it took me so long to tell you. Flint read the letter 3 times. Then he turned it over and found the key. The contents of Thaddeus Ashford's safety deposit box took down an additional 47 people over the next 6 months. State legislators, police chiefs, business executives, a federal judge. The network's tendrils had spread further than anyone imagined. But what Flint found most valuable was not the names of the criminals. It was the names of the victims. Children who had disappeared over 20 years. Their cases buried. Their families left without answers. Ashford had kept records of all of them, a secret accounting of his sins, including one name that made Flint's heart stop. Rosalie Donovan, abducted June 15, 2006. Deceased June 22, 2006. Remains located at Pinner Ridge Cemetery. Plot 847. Section C. Ashford had known, all these years. He had known where Rosalie was buried, and he had said nothing. Flint wanted to hate him for that. Part of him did hate him, but a larger part understood. Ashford had been broken by the same tragedy that had broken Flint. The only difference was how they had chosen to carry their grief. One had used it to hurt. One had used it to help. The funeral was held on a Sunday afternoon in late spring. They buried Rosalie Donovan in the cemetery where her mother Elena had been laid to rest 15 years earlier. Cancer had taken Elena before they could find their daughter. Now finally the family was together again. The Steel Brotherhood came in full colors, their motorcycles lining the road in a gleaming procession. They stood at attention as the small casket was lowered into the ground, tears streaming down faces that had seen war and violence and death, but never anything quite like this. Wren Callahan stood between her parents, holding Flint's hand. "Is Rosalie happy now?" she whispered. "I think so, sweetheart. I think she's finally at peace." "And will you be sad forever?" Flint considered the question carefully. "No, I'll be sad sometimes, when I think about what she missed. But mostly I'll remember the good parts, her laugh, her smile, the way she used to wake me up on Saturday mornings by jumping on my bed." Wren nodded solemnly. "That's how I want to remember the bad time. Not the scary parts. The part where you saved me. The part where I found my angels." The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving Flint alone at the graveside. He stood there for a long time, watching the sun set, watching the sky shift from blue to gold to crimson. "I'm sorry it took so long," he finally said. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you, but I want you to know what happened because of you. Because losing you broke me into pieces, and those pieces turned into something that saved other children." The wind stirred the flowers covering the grave. "Your memory protected dozens of lives, baby girl. Dozens of children went home to their families because your dad refused to stop fighting." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I met a little girl named Wren. She's 7 now. Most courageous kid I've ever seen. She ran into a bar full of bikers because she knew she needed help, and she wasn't afraid to ask for it." A sad smile crossed his face. "She reminds me of you sometimes. That same stubbornness, that same fire." He placed his hand on the headstone, feeling the cool marble beneath his palm. "I'm not going to stop Rosalie. As long as I'm breathing, I'm going to keep protecting children. I'm going to keep being the person you needed me to be when I wasn't there." His voice broke. "And every kid we save, every family we make whole again, that's you, that's your legacy. That's what your life meant." A small hand slipped into his. Wren had come back. She stood beside him in the fading light, her face solemn but unafraid. "Mr. Flint." "Yeah, little bird. Rosalie wants me to tell you something." Flint's heart clenched. "What?" "She said she led me to your door that day, when I was running from the bad man. She said she whispered in my ear, 'Go there, they'll help you. My daddy will keep you safe.'" Wren looked up at him with quiet certainty. "I thought it was just my imagination. But it wasn't. It was her. She's been watching over you this whole time, waiting for you to find her." Tears streamed down Flint's face. "And now you did, and she's happy. She's so happy, Mr. Flint. She wants you to know that." He could not speak. He pulled Wren into his arms, holding on like she was the only real thing in a world that had stopped making sense. "Thank you, little bird, thank you." "You're welcome." She hugged him back. She also said one more thing. "What?" She said it's okay to be happy now. It's okay to stop being sad, because she's not sad anymore. And she doesn't want you to be sad either. Flint closed his eyes. For 20 years he had carried this weight, this grief, this guilt that had become so much a part of him he did not know who he was without it. But standing here in the cemetery where his daughter was finally at rest with a little girl who had brought him back to life holding his hand, he felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but permission. Permission to let go, to move forward, to become something other than a man defined by loss. 1 year after the trial, the Iron Horse Tavern had been transformed. A new wing had been added to the main building, bright and welcoming. A sign above the entrance read Little Angels Community Center in cheerful blue letters. Inside the space had been turned into a haven for at-risk youth, after-school programs, counseling services, emergency shelter for children in crisis. A partnership with local law enforcement had created a rapid response network for child protection cases. Other motorcycle clubs had reached out wanting to replicate the model. The Steel Brotherhood had become something more than a motorcycle club. They had become a movement. On a Saturday afternoon in July, the community center hosted a celebration for the families of rescued children, parents and kids who had traveled from across the country to meet the men who had saved their sons and daughters. Flint watched from the porch as hardened bikers ran three-legged races with 5-year-olds. Hawk sat in a corner reading picture books to a circle of toddlers. Ranger was teaching older kids self-defense, explaining that awareness and preparation were the best protections. Sable coordinated everything with her usual efficiency, making sure everyone had food and drinks and someone to talk to if they needed it. And Wren Callahan was everywhere at once, helping with games, comforting younger children, making sure everyone felt welcome. She had become a sort of unofficial ambassador for the center, a living symbol of what courage and hope could accomplish. She was 8 now, a little taller, a little more confident, but with the same unwavering determination that had carried her through those 47 hours of hell. She found Flint on the porch as the afternoon began to fade. "Mr. Flint." "Yeah, little bird. Can I ask you something?" "Always. When I grow up, can I be like Miss Sable? Can I help save kids too?" Flint crouched down to her level. "You already saved kids, Wren. You saved them by being brave enough to run through that door, by being brave enough to trust us, by being brave enough to testify in court." He smiled. "You've done more at 8 years old than most people do in a lifetime. But I want to do more. I want to be an angel like you." Flint felt his throat tighten. "You're already an angel, little bird. You don't need a motorcycle or a leather vest. You just need to keep being exactly who you are. Kind, brave, willing to stand up for people who need help." Wren threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Mr. Flint. I love you too, sweetheart. Always will." The sound of gravel crunching made them both look up. A car had pulled into the parking lot, old and rusted, moving slowly, uncertainly. It stopped at the edge of the lot. The engine cut off. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the passenger door opened. A child climbed out. A girl, maybe 6 or 7, dirty and bruised, her eyes wide with terror, her clothes torn, her feet bare. She stood at the edge of the parking lot, looking at the building, at the motorcycles, at the big men and women gathered on the porch. She was shaking. Everyone had gone still, watching, waiting. Wren stepped forward. She walked across the parking lot slowly, carefully, the way you would approach a frightened animal. No sudden movements, no loud sounds. She stopped a few feet from the girl, and she knelt down, making herself small, making herself safe. "Hey there." Her voice was soft, gentle, absolutely certain. "You're safe now. My name is Wren. I got away once too." The girl stared at her, not quite believing. "I know you're scared. I was scared too. But these people helped me. They're going to help you. I promise." She held out her hand. "Promise, promise." The girl looked at Wren's hand, looked at her face, looked at the community center behind her with its bright sign and open doors and the sound of children laughing inside. And slowly, carefully, she reached out and took Wren's hand. "What's your name?" Wren asked. "Lily." "That's a pretty name. I like lilies. They're strong flowers. They grow back every year no matter what." She stood up, still holding Lily's hand. "Come on, Lily, let's go inside. There's hot chocolate and cookies and people who want to help you." She looked back at Flint. "Mr. Flint, we have a new friend. She needs us. Flint walked across the parking lot, his brothers falling in behind him, a wall of leather and muscle and fierce protective love. He crouched down to Lily's level. Hey there, sweetheart. Welcome to the Iron Horse. You're safe now. Lily looked at him, at his scarred face and hard eyes and leather vest. Are you a monster? Flint smiled. Yeah, I'm a monster. But I'm the kind of monster that fights other monsters. The kind that protects kids like you. He held out his massive hand. What do you say, want to come inside and meet some more monsters? Lily looked at Wren, then at Flint, then at the building full of light and laughter and safety, and she smiled, small and tentative, like a flower opening after a long frost. Okay. Wren led her inside, introducing her to the other children, finding her a blanket and a cup of hot chocolate in a quiet corner where she could feel safe. Flint watched from the doorway. Sable appeared at his shoulder. Another one. Yeah, another one. How many does that make this month? 7. He shook his head. They just keep coming. Word's getting out. Kids know this is a safe place. A place where someone will listen. Someone will help. That's because of you. Because of what you built here. Flint shook his head. That's because of Wren. She's the one who started all this. She's the one who ran through that door and asked for help. He watched the little girl move among the children, comforting, guiding, protecting. She's something else, Raven. Something special. She is, Sable agreed, and so are you, whether you want to admit it or not. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the celebration, watching the families and children and bikers all mixed together, watching something beautiful grow from the ashes of something terrible. Flint. Yeah, Rosalie would be proud of you. He felt the familiar ache in his chest, but it was softer now, gentler, more like a memory than a wound. I know, he said. I finally know. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, Wren Callahan sat on the porch of the Little Angels Community Center. Lily was asleep in her lap, exhausted from fear and relief and the overwhelming experience of being safe for the first time in days. Flint sat beside them, his motorcycle parked nearby, his brothers scattered around the property, standing guard, keeping watch, always protecting. Mr. Flint, yeah, little bird, do you think there will always be bad men, men who hurt kids? Flint considered the question. Probably. The world isn't perfect. There will always be people who do terrible things. Then what's the point if we can't stop all of them? The point isn't to stop all of them. The point is to save the ones we can, to be there when kids need us, to make sure no one ever feels like they're alone. He put his arm around her shoulders. You taught me that, little bird, when you ran through that door, when you asked for help. You showed me that one person can make a difference, that one brave act can change everything. Wren looked up at him. Grandma May was right, wasn't she, about the angels with tattoos? Flint smiled. She was right about a lot of things. I miss her. I know, but she's still with you in your heart, in your courage, in the way you help other kids who are scared and alone. Wren nodded slowly. I want to help forever. I want to save kids until there are no more kids who need saving. That's a big dream. Big dreams are the only ones worth having. Flint laughed. Who told you that? You did, last week, when you were teaching me to ride the motorcycle. He shook his head. You remember everything, don't you? Everything, she said. That's my superpower. Lily stirred in her lap, murmuring something in her sleep. Wren stroked her hair gently. She's going to be okay. Like me. Like all the others. Yes, she is. Because we're here. Because we care. Because we don't give up. That's right, little bird. That's exactly right. The stars were coming out now, filling the Montana sky with their ancient light. Somewhere out there, other children were scared. Other children were alone. Other children were waiting for someone to care enough to find them. But here in this place that had been built on grief and transformed by love, there was hope. There was courage. There was a little girl who had run through a door and changed everything. And there was a brotherhood of monsters who had learned to be angels. Mr. Flint, yeah, promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll never stop. No matter what happens. No matter how hard it gets, promise me you'll always be here for kids who need help. Flint looked at her, at this remarkable child who had survived the unsurvivable, who had not only saved herself, but had inspired a movement, who had taken her darkest moment and turned it into a light that would guide other children home. I promise, he said. Good, because angels don't retire. They just keep flying. She leaned against his shoulder, Lily still sleeping in her lap. I love you, Mr. Flint. I love you too, little bird. More than you know. The night deepened around them. The sounds of celebration faded into comfortable silence. And in the darkness, a voice that might have been the wind or might have been something else entirely whispered words that only Flint could hear. Thank you, Daddy, for becoming who I always knew you could be. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in 20 years, he felt at peace. Because angels do not need wings. Sometimes they have leather vests and loud motorcycles and scarred hands that have done violence in the service of love. Sometimes they are 6 years old with bare feet and a courage that defies understanding. Sometimes they are broken people who refuse to stay broken. And sometimes, just sometimes, they are all of us. Waiting for the moment when a child runs through a door and asks for help. Waiting for the chance to become the monsters who fight other monsters. Waiting for the opportunity to whisper the words that change everything. You are safe now, I promise.